Okay, hey, welcome to episode 65 of the Apple Podcast by Lex at Max Future. And wow, we're up to episode 65 and it's April 1st, 2011, April Fool's Day. And, well, there's a lot of news and information we can discuss regarding Apple products, and the state of Apple land. So let's get to it. Well, the really big news that affects Apple is that it looks like Amazon pulled a fast one on Apple. Now, as many of you may have known, Apple was rumored for weeks, if not months now, to be releasing a cloud version of its iTunes music and video service. And the rumors had been that Apple is going to unveil a new mobile Me with a digital locker where you could put your iTunes music and videos and have them stream to you from wherever you are on your computer or on your iDevice, iPhone, iPad. Well, Amazon pulled a fast one, and pulled a fast one not only on Apple but on Google, because also for weeks, if not months, there had been rumors that Google was in negotiations with the music labels to come up with some sort of streaming music service where you could store your digital data. And Amazon pulled a fast one. And how did it pull a fast one? Well, this past Sunday, and I think it was at nighttime, but I'm pretty sure it was this past Sunday, but it was definitely earlier this week, Amazon suddenly announced, out of the blue, nobody expected this, that Amazon was creating a new digital music service where you could store your music, even music that you didn't buy from Amazon or videos that you didn't buy from Amazon. You can store them on Amazon's cloud storage system. And here are the terms that Amazon rolled out. Essentially, if you have an Amazon account, you get 5 gigabytes for free automatically. You don't have to do anything. And you can upload any MP3 or video file, or frankly, you can store other files. And you can upload them to your Amazon digital locker, and it'll stream, and you can play that music, and I guess play that video, but for now you can play the music, and all for free for 5 gigabytes. Now, 5 gigabytes is not a lot, and Amazon has a promotion now where if you buy an album, a music album from Amazon, you get automatically another 20 gigabytes of storage. So it's pretty interesting. Okay, so the other terms of service for this Amazon service are this. In addition to getting 20 gigabytes free if you buy an album, the regular cost of 20 gigabytes is $20 a year. So for $20 a year, you can upload your music and store it in 20 gigabytes worth of storage. And essentially it's $1 a gigabyte, because Amazon's plan has yearly pricing up to 1 terabyte, and 1 terabyte costs $1,000 a year. Now here's the interesting catch. If you purchase music or video from Amazon, it goes into this digital online locker, and it doesn't count against your storage limit. So essentially, you're encouraged to buy music and videos from Amazon. And here's another little twist, which is that this music player online will stream the music to you over any Mac or Windows computer through the browser, and over Android handheld or tablet devices. But it will not stream over the browser that's on your iPhone or iPad. So this looks pretty anti-Apple as it's currently constructed. Now, the original response from this was that a lot of the music labels were outraged, because it appears that Amazon had not gone out and secured contracts or licenses that covered this sort of service. And the speculation is that Amazon probably thought that legally it could get away with doing this because it could argue that users are just uploading their own music or music that they bought from Amazon, and they're just storing it somewhere else. But I guess the big hook is that users can now stream the music from the cloud, not from their own hard drive, but from the service. So what was my reaction to all of this? Well, I put a pretty lengthy post up on maxfuture.com, and this is what I called it. I said, why Backblaze and other cloud services as well as Apple and Google should take on Amazon digital streaming. And so what I say is, well, by now most everyone knows that Amazon announced and revealed a cloud-based way for you to stream your music from the cloud. Amazon beat Apple and Google and others to creating an online music locker for your music. So what does it mean? Well, first, it appears that Amazon didn't bother to get licenses from music publishers for this new service. It is a bold move by Amazon, and it may be what allowed Amazon to beat Apple and Google to revealing an online music locker and streaming service. Apple and Google probably have been delayed in creating a cloud-based service because they probably have been negotiating the paperwork with the big music publishers. Apple and Google executives are probably screaming at the music publishers right now, saying something like, "You have to do something to stop Amazon. We spent all this time negotiating with you, the music publisher, and meanwhile our competitor is going forward without getting any new licensing contract," end quote. Or the Apple and Google executives could be saying to the music publishers something like this, quote, "If you don't go to court ASAP against Amazon, then we, Apple and Google, will immediately start providing a similar service without getting paperwork from you." The bottom line is that either there will be significant litigation going on with Amazon and or Apple, Google, and others will provide similar services. Now, I go on to say Amazon's digital music streaming service isn't so great unless you buy all your music and digital files from Amazon. Here is the bottom line. And then I go through the terms again. And so I then go on to say that Amazon's prices, which are $1 per gigabyte per year, are pretty high. So 1 terabyte of storage costs $1,000 per year. Now, I have currently 300 gigabytes of music and video files, so that would cost me $300 per year to store and stream from Amazon's cloud-based service. For me, that's a no thank you to Amazon. Now, Apple, Google, and others can beat Amazon's service by offering better terms on the storage space for the music and other digital files that you have not purchased from them. Apple in particular could offer the same terms as Amazon and beat Amazon, as most people have already purchased a lot of music, videos, and apps from Apple. Apple could say that all music, videos, and apps you already purchased from Apple will be in your online digital locker for free. So that's one way that Apple could address this. Now, I go on to say, but you know how a company could really crush Amazon, Apple, and Google with this streaming service? Online backup services that already provide backup of your computer files could offer a feature that matches Amazon's streaming services. And I go on to point out what I currently do. For example, I have Backblaze, which is an online backup service. Now, Backblaze only charges $50 per year for unlimited storage online, including unlimited online backup of external hard drives connected to your computer. Now, if Amazon gets the green light from the courts or from the music publishers to stream customers' own music from the cloud with no additional licensing, then why shouldn't Backblaze and other online backup services like Mozy offer the same thing? I could see Backblaze charging $50 on top of the $50 it already charges me per year for my right to stream my media to myself. That would be very reasonable, and that would really, beat Amazon's terms. my digital media is already in the cloud with Backblaze. So it wouldn't be that hard for Backblaze to flip a switch and stream files to me. So look, I mean, I think we're entering a brave new world with what Amazon's doing, and I think Apple has to address that very soon. Now, Peter Kafka of the Wall Street Journal doesn't seem to be particularly thrilled with Amazon's music online service, because this is what he says. He says, here's what Amazon's cloud system does. It lets you store your music and other files, including movies, on Amazon servers. It lets you play your music, but only your music, on Google's Android devices via an app, and on Macs and PCs via web browser. And then he goes on to saying, here's what it doesn't do. It won't let you play your music on your Apple iOS device, iPad, iPhone, or iPod. It won't help you find and listen to music you don't own, which is another major point. It really is just storing the music there and letting you play it. He goes on to say, I can't think of a reason not to use Amazon's service, especially since its freemium pricing model gives you 5 gigabytes of storage gratis. But I also can't imagine it fundamentally changing the way anyone consumes music. If you buy digital music, it might make you ever so slightly inclined to buy it from Amazon, because the file won't count against your storage limits, but stuff you buy from iTunes, which dominates the market, will work just fine too. No, well, I slightly disagree with Mr. Kafka, because I think Amazon wants to take away market share from Apple, which dominates online sales. And so what Amazon is hoping is that your future buying occurs with Amazon. But here's where it gets really interesting. I already have a huge music collection. I will only go forward and buy from Amazon if I truly felt nobody else would offer an online music streaming service for the music that I already have. So if Apple had comes out and says, no, we're not going to do that, we're not going to have streaming music of things you buy from us, then I would buy my music from Amazon. But there's no way I'm going to pay $300 a year to upload 300 gigabytes worth of digital media that I already have on Amazon service. It's too expensive. So, and I'm pretty sure Apple is going to probably come out with a similar streaming service, and maybe Google too. So we're going to have competition, and it's going to really just change the landscape. Okay, so other big news this week is that Apple announced that WWDC will be held from June 6th to June 10th in the Moscone Center in San Francisco. And immediately it allowed developers to purchase tickets to WWDC, and I think the tickets cost $1,500 to that event. Now, some of you may not know what WWDC is, and what it is, it's Apple's annual conference for developers, people who develop on the iOS platform, which is for iPods and iPhones, and for people who develop applications and software products for the Mac platform. And over the years, this has become a bigger and, a must-have event. Now, what was particularly interesting here is that within something like 12 hours, all 5,000 or so tickets at $1,500 a pop sold out. So within less than one day, 12 hours, the tickets for WWDC sold out. And what this means is that there's a huge interest by people who want to develop, and developers who want to develop software for the iDevices and for the Mac devices. And I guess last year the tickets also sold out, but they sold out in, a matter of days or weeks. And I think the year before it sold out, but it sold out in several weeks or several months. And prior to that time, they never sold out. So this is a big change. Now, Apple hasn't expanded the number of seats, because one of the big advantages if you're a developer and you go to this event is that you get to meet with Apple Apple's own in-house developers and programmers and show your code to your programs if you're a developer. So it's a real opportunity for anybody developing an iOS app to meet with Apple and to get inside tips on how to code better and how to program. And so it's a really must-have event. Now, apparently, some people are buying their ticket for WWDC and selling them on eBay for thousands and thousands of dollars more. So it's almost like the iPad lines, that there's a real demand. There's almost Apple mania going on. And WWDC is part of that mania. Now, there's other controversies surrounding the WWDC event. And one controversy is that, I guess something that Apple said in its note to developers indicated that there won't be hardware announcements at WWDC, which was immediately interpreted on the internet as meaning that at WWDC there will not be the announcement of the iPhone 5 hardware. Now, why is this significant? Because every year in the past few years since the launch of the first iPhone, WWDC has been the event that Apple has announced the iPhone and then the annual update to the iPhone. So now there's all sorts of speculation that the iPhone will not be, iPhone 5 will not come out in June of 2011, that it'll be put off until the fall. But all Apple said was that it's not going to be revealed at WWDC. And I personally think that the iPhone 5 will still be revealed in June, but that Apple will have a separate event for the iPhone 5. And here's why. WWDC is really an event for developers. It's not really a big press event or a big event for the public. And maybe Apple wants to separate WWDC, which is really going to focus on the new operating system for the Mac. Lion is going to be discussed and maybe released at WWDC. So maybe Apple doesn't want to reveal the iPhone 5 at WWDC, but is still going to release it in June, the iPhone 5, at another event. So that's my prediction. Now, the other controversy with WWDC this year is that it annually has awards for developers. And last year, it announced that the only awards were going to be for iOS developers, that there were going to be no awards for developers who develop programs for the Mac. And some people took that to mean that Apple was abandoning the Macs, and that Macs were no longer important to Apple, and that rather iDevices like the iPhone, the iPod Touch, and the iPad were what were important. But remember, then Apple, subsequent to that, Apple revealed the Mac App Store and revealed that it's working on Lion. So this year, Apple is limiting the developer awards only to developers who develop apps that are sold or distributed through the app stores. In other words, through the Mac App Store or through the iOS app stores on the iPhone and the iPad. So what does that mean? That means that Apple is only going to be rewarding developers who distribute their Mac products, Mac software, through the App Store on the Mac. Now, if you haven't used the App Store on the Mac, it's really cool. It's just like the one on the iPad and the iPhone. And the big advantage to the Mac App Store is there's actually two big advantages that I see with the Mac App Store. One, you just click on an app and you buy it if you already have an account, and it works with your iTunes account. Okay, actually, there's three advantages to it. Okay, so here are the three advantages to the Mac App Store. The first is, you can buy apps through Apple through your iTunes account. So you don't have to go through the whole billing rigmarole when you buy software from other sites. I mean, often it varies from site to site when you want to buy software for the Mac. prior to the Mac App Store. You got to fill out your credit card information. You're always a little nervous about how good that site is at protecting your financial data. And here, your purchase is made through the Mac App Store. It's through Mac's iTunes account. So you know who's responsible for your credit card. Apple is. And if there's something wrong, and some theft of services of your account, you can deal with Apple, and that's for all Mac apps. That's the first advantage. The second advantage is anything that you buy through the Mac App Store that's on your Mac, even if it's not an Apple software, if you want to update it, the Mac App Store senses that and will just automatically update any apps that you bought through the Mac App Store. And that's exactly the same as the App Store on the iPhone and the iPad. And that's a huge, huge luxury, because previously you would have to launch a third-party app and go into maybe the preferences or the help and manually check to see if there's a new version of the app. And here, anytime you launch the Mac App Store on your Mac, you can just check the update area and it'll tell you, hey, there's a couple of updates waiting. So that's the second reason. And the third is Apple gives you the right to install any program you buy in the Mac App Store on multiple Macs. And this is very similar to the iPad and the iPhone. And I forget what the number is, but I know it's at least 5. So what that means is if you buy some software through the Mac App Store, you can put it on, I think, up to 5 computers. And all you have to do to download it is make sure those computers have the same Mac App Store account. So if your family's all on the same common Mac App Store account, your copy of Aperture, which is an Apple photo library that's a stage up from iPhoto, if you bought that, well, you can put it on your second, third, fourth, fifth computer. Now, before, you couldn't do that. And there was a lot of third-party apps that you couldn't do that. You get one license, and it would be costly. Now, I'll give you an example. I'm interested in purchasing a pretty comprehensive screen recording software and editing program for the Mac called Camtasia. Or if I don't purchase that, there's ScreenFlow. And they both cost $99. Now, previous to the Mac App Store, I would pay $99, and if I wanted to put it on a second computer I have, I'd have to pay another $99, and it'd be a cumbersome serial, process where you have to put a serial number. But now, both Camtasia and ScreenFlow are available in the Mac App Store, and if I buy one of those products, I can put it on any other computer I have, and I think I can put it on up to 5 or 6 computers. So those are the three big luxuries that you now have with the Mac App Store. Now, some developers I guess, might not like the Mac App Store for 2 reasons I see. Actually 3 reasons. One reason is not all apps can get into the Mac App Store. Certain apps that take advantage of the underlying operating system of the Mac can't get in. So, for example, I have this fantastic program that I've been using for years from Rogue Amoeba, the developer Rogue Amoeba, called Audio Hijack. And Audio Hijack cleverly gets into your sound system and allows you to hijack and record any sound that is played through your computer, which means any music you play on the internet from some service, you can record that music and save it as a file. Similarly, you can use it to record music through your microphone connected to the computer. So it's a great program, but it does not appear that it'll ever be sold in the Mac App Store because it goes into the underlying operating system. Similarly, there are programs that help you clone your hard drive and essentially act as a backup for your computer, like Carbon Cloner and Super Duper. and they necessarily have to get into the guts of the operating system. So they're not going to be in the Mac App Store. So those developers don't like it. Plus, there are developers who don't like it because Apple takes a 30% cut of the Mac App Store, of anything that's sold. So they're getting a cut of their sales. On the other hand, they'll probably sell a lot more apps through the Mac App Store because of the visibility. And then the third reason that some developers aren't going to like it is because developers aren't going to get data as to who's buying their app. They're not going to know the names of their purchasers or their addresses or their emails. So they're not going to be able to communicate like offers to them. On the other hand, they don't have to deal as much with the headache of keeping track of their customers and emailing them. So there's pros and cons. So why is Apple excluding then the developers who make Mac apps and don't distribute through the Mac App Store? Because Apple is clearly pushing developers to go along with the future of the Mac, which is that Apple ultimately wants all programs to go through the Mac App Store. Now, Apple has done this before. Remember, when Apple first announced Lion, which was 10 years ago, Lion worked on PowerPCs, which were a different processor than Intel. And as the last decade went forward, in mid-decade, Apple switched to Intel and had Intel processors. And Apple, for this transition period, because you're switching processors, there were certain programs, the new programs were written in the native code needed for Intel processors. Apple decided, okay, we're going to support historic programs that were written for the PowerPC processor through an application called Rosetta. And Rosetta, if you remember, was this emulation program that would allow you to run old software that wasn't written for Intel computers. And you could shut Rosetta off. But if you had any, programs that you bought and didn't update that were like, let's say, from 2002 or 2000 or 2003, then you needed Rosetta. Now, here's the thing. In this last version of Snow Leopard, Apple announced that it wasn't going to support Rosetta anymore. And that's it. It's over. So Apple does draw the line at some point and say, hey, we're making a transition, you're going to go forward, and we're switching, and we're going to stop supporting something. So Apple is sending a clear message by this that the future for developers is the App Store. And yes, you can go ahead and develop programs outside the App Store, like on iDevices, you can develop programs for the Cydia store, which is a jailbreak store, or you can develop programs for the Mac that aren't sold from the Mac App Store, but Apple is not going to recognize you and award you at these conferences. And so, these awards are probably significant because Apple does publicize on its website when a developer wins an award, and it will give awards to apps, and it does highlight apps. One of the great things for app developers in the iOS App Store and also the Mac App Store is Apple highlights apps and advertises in the App Store for new apps. So a lot of smaller apps that aren't made by big developers get a lot of press, and that helps them with their sales. So anyways, that's the way I see the future of the Mac App Store and the iPad and iPhone App Store. Okay, so other news this week is that Apple released to developers, and remember, you can get this release if you're a developer just paying $100 a year to be a Mac developer and an iOS developer. Well, Apple revealed the second beta of Mac OS X Lion. That's 10.7. Now, Apple previously announced that it was developing Lion, which is expected to be released during WWDC in June. But a couple of days ago, Apple released to developers the second beta. So what are some of the new things in the second beta? Well, according to MacNN, one of the new things is the change of the look of things like iChat and iCal. So iCal now matches, in terms of how it looks, the revamped line address book and sporting, according to MacNN, a classic historical real-world look, specifically a leather-bound hand-stitched design that goes beyond the luxurious look of some iPad apps. So if you're looking at the video version of this podcast, I have some of the pictures that MacNN posted. Now, MacNN says that iChat has consolidated its improved connectivity into a single window. So that's good. Now, MacNN says some people are split as to the iCal's new look, and these are the developers who looked at it, though most welcome the change in overall layout, first introduced in the iPad. So it looks like the iCal and iChat. Now, apparently iChat can now automatically consolidate Bonjour, AIM, Yahoo, and Jabber contacts together in something called an idiom-esque style. And this comes via 9 to 5 Mac. Now MacNN also has some other news about the new line preview, and this comes via Apple Insider. And what MacNN and Apple Insider say is that the new line preview has a new feature regarding the screen sharing. And now screen sharing allows multiple remote users to log into accounts that are not currently active, and allowing for concurrent users working independently of each other, which is much closer to Apple's remote desktop ability or Microsoft's terminal service. So what this means is this. Currently on a Mac, you can create different user accounts, but obviously only one user is using the computer at the same time. And so currently when you do the screen sharing remotely, someone can log in and see the computer's screen from another computer, another Mac. But it is limited to the screen that's currently active in the computer. So what this new feature does is, let's say the child of the family has an account, the dad has an account, the mom has an account, and let's say the dad's using the computer, and the mom could be remotely somewhere else and log into her account on that computer, even though the dad's using it. So that's a welcomed feature that, I can't wait till Line comes officially to everybody in the summer, because it's going to be much, much better. Okay, now let's go on to something that's very, very cool. If you're a musician or want to be a musician and you like using your instruments with the Mac. Now let me just start off by saying one of the reasons I got into the Mac many, 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 many years ago was that the Mac was one of the first computers to allow electronic keyboards and synthesizers to be hooked up to a Mac, and then have the Mac through a sequencer, that's what they were called, and MIDI connections control an external instrument. So essentially the Mac could be like an orchestra. Well, the Mac and music continue to be intertwined, and one of the most notable music instrument companies in the world, Roland, has a new feature that works on the Mac as well as Windows computers, but let's talk about it as a Mac-centric thing. A new feature that allows you to be a drummer and be social with people throughout the world with your drumming. So here's what's going on. Roland this week on March 30th announced something called Roland Friend Jam. And what Roland says in its press release is that it's a powerful new social networking tool for drummers. And it goes on to say that it's basically your V drums, which are electronic drums, are interfaced with a Mac or Windows computer, and V-Drums Friend Jam automatically downloads a suite of practice songs after a user installs the application on their computer. Now these play-along songs, they cover popular music styles according to Roland, including rock, pop, jazz, metal, and more. And they also feature full band arrangements minus the drums, so that way you can play along. In addition to these practice tracks, Roland says users can also add MP3 files stored on their computer and jam with their favorite tunes. Now here's where it gets kind of interesting. Roland says by connecting their V-Drum kit to the computer using a MIDI interface, players can record and evaluate individual performance elements, including beat, stamina, and technique. And then, using their Twitter account, they can share their results and compare how they rank with other V-Drum Friend Jam users around the world. In addition, the included calendar feature records daily playing time, provides an easy and convenient way for players to set, and achieve practical goals. But I mean, what really intrigues me is this Twitter integration, where they can share their results and compare how they rank with other V-Drum Friend Jam users. So essentially, it's almost like a competitive game. Like you're actually really drumming. This is, better than, Guitar Hero, because you're actually learning to drum and you're being judged in your drumming, and you're comparing it through Twitter and through your Mac connection with other users around the world. So, I think we're going to see more and more social media in these musical instruments that are hooked up to the Mac or to the iPad. Okay, so one of the big controversies that affects the iPhone and the iPad surrounded Twitter. And if you haven't been following it, what happened was a couple of weeks ago, Twitter did an update to its Twitter app on the iPhone, and I also think on the iPad, but it was particularly bad on the iPhone. And the controversy was that it created a bar at the top of the screen where your Twitter feeds are. And this bar, which was supposed to have hot search results that other people are conducting, quickly became known as the Dick Bar in a derogatory way by the users. And there was essentially a user revolt. A lot of prominent tech people like John Gruber at Daring Fireball, Marco Arment, the developer of Tumblr, and others heavily criticized Twitter because this bar at the top of the screen was just terrible, because it gave these sort of top search feeds or trends on Twitter, and it blocked the view. And it was heavy criticism. And frankly, a lot of people, including me, downgraded my Twitter app so that it went to the prior version, which is kind of a pain on iOS, because you can't just upgrade all apps, because if you want to go back to a prior one, you have to use like Time Machine or find the old app and restore it. Well, 2 days ago, Twitter reversed itself and issued a PR statement basically saying that, it heard feedback from people, and it was exploring other means, for trends and advertisement, and it dropped the notorious Dick Bar. So in a sense, kudos to Twitter for listening to its customers and for reversing its mistake, because it was heavily criticized, and instead of just sticking to its guns stupidly, keeping this Dick Bar, Twitter did the right thing. Twitter listened to its users and fixed the problem and dropped the Dick Bar. So good for them. Now, if you're into photography and social networking, one strange but somewhat popular app that has come out now is something called Color. That's the name of the app, and it's free. And it's also a service. And it also got a lot of controversy because it came out that, this startup company called Color, which the guy who purchased the web name Color.com paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for the name Color.com. And he got, I think the people who created this app got something like $40 million in venture capital funding. So that caused a little bit of a stir in Silicon Valley. So what is Color? Well, I downloaded the app, and essentially Color, the problem with Color is it's this app that doesn't tell you much. It just says take pictures. And here's the thing. Color takes pictures and then finds other people who are using the Color app nearby, and then automatically starts grouping those pictures together. So in one way, it's a little creepy, and it could be, in some limited situations, useful. So here's how it's creepy. It's creepy because I don't think you have a choice as to which pictures it bunches together. Color just sort of looks to see where you're located, looks to see who else is using the Color app nearby, and then says, here are some other people nearby, and here are their pictures with the Color app. Now, if you're in a place where there's not anyone near you using the Color app, you can take pictures, but they're not going to be grouped together with other pictures. So where a Color app could be very useful is if you and your friends all have the Color app and you're at a party and you're taking pictures at the party. Because what will happen is within the Color app, your pictures will start to be bunched with the other people at the party's pictures who are taking pictures with the Color app. So that seems to me the main gist of the app. So we'll have to see how good it is. Now it looks like Apple is going to be affected somewhat by the crisis in Japan. There's a story out in Digitimes which basically says that Apple is going to absorb the increasing costs created by the Japanese earthquake. And there are components that go into the iPad, into the iPhone, and other Apple products that are made in Japan, and I guess are made in factories near, the nuclear facility or factories that were affected by the tsunami and the earthquake. And so Apple, really needs these components, and so it's willing to pay a premium. Now, I don't think Apple's going to increase the cost of any iPads or iPhones or Macs, but it could affect some of its margin. So we'll have to see what happens. Now, the next story doesn't directly concern Apple, but it does impact Apple, and that is Google finally announced the winner of its, contest where Google is going to put 1 gigabit internet access, wired access to a whole community. And on March 30th, 2011, Google announced that it had awarded this decision to Kansas City, Kansas. And so what Google is going to do is Google is going to actually work with the city and government officials in Kansas City and provide 1 gigabit broadband internet access to citizens in Kansas City. And what we're talking about is the cable connection or the optic fiber connection like Verizon Fios, but it's going to be ultra fast. And so why does this concern Apple? Well, it concerns Apple for a couple of reasons. One, Google is a competitor of Apple, and if Google controls the pipes that we connect through, let's say Google expands this project and takes on the cable companies and Verizon Fios and starts wiring all of America with really fast internet access. Well, that's great. I would love that. On the other hand, that's a lot of power, because if Google beats cable and all that, and Google's a search provider, then Google has a lot of power over any company that needs the internet for its customers. And Apple obviously is also in some way a competitor with Google, particularly in iOS and smartphone operating systems. But Apple also has a web presence. Apple's about to come out with a music streaming service. And so Apple could be threatened by this. Now, the other way Apple is affected by this is that Apple may be in a position where it has to offer similar services to compete with Google. What if Google spreads out this service of creating internet access throughout the country and basically gives you a deal on it if you have an Android device, or if you have the Chrome computer that Google is going to be developing, which is just a browser-based computer with no storage that's cloud-based. Well, that could cut into Apple's sales of Macintoshes and iPads and iPhones. So I think Apple's watching this development by Google very closely. Now, Apple has a massive financial hoard of $60 billion in cash. And Apple currently is beholden to internet service providers, both on smartphones and on landlines. So who knows, maybe Apple will also get into this game of putting in fiber and connectivity in the United States. Because when you have that, you can offer customers an integrated service. So I'd like to see that. I hope that happens. Okay, so if you're looking to buy a new Mac and a MacBook Pro, you may want to read a really amazing and compelling article by Infoworld.com. And it had a review of the new MacBook Pros. Apple just upgraded the new MacBook Pros. And it has an article that if you're even on the edge of buying a MacBook Pro, it'll make you want to buy a MacBook Pro. I mean, I have an iMac, and God, I'm lusting for a MacBook Pro. And the article is entitled Thunderbolt MacBook Pro, the last notebook you will ever need. That's a pretty profound statement. And it basically is this incredibly glowing review. And here's something that the article says. With the new Thunderbolt MacBook Pro, so nicknamed for its revolutionary high-speed I/O port, that's just what you'll get. The 15-inch and 17-inch quad-core models deliver twice the CPU performance of Core 2 Duo, 3 times the graphic performance of the previous generation's NVIDIA GeoForce GT 330M, and more than 10 times the external I/O bandwidth of the 800 megahertz FireWire, even with a base price of just $1,199 in dual-core instead of quad-core CPUs. The new 13-inch MacBook Pro still outpaces prior Mac notebooks in terms of CPU and I/O performance. And then this part's really interesting. The article says this brand of magic can't be conjured by Apple's competitors. Sustained innovations like the MagSafe quick disconnected charge port, the industrial-grade frame machined from a solid block of aluminum, digital optical audio input and output, automatic integrated discrete GPU graphics processing unit switching, and a 5-year battery already have no equal. So that's really interesting. I mean, I never really thought about it, but there are all these features that sort of come standard in your $1,100 MacBook Pro that a lot of people don't have, like this integrated discrete GPU switching and the 5-year battery and the digital audio in and out. So Apple has this article. I guess it's so powerful it's on its website, but you may want to read it. It came out I think earlier this week, so go to Infoworld.com. Okay, so Mac Rumors has a nice story. Mac Rumors is reporting that Apple is working on bringing Spaces to the iPad. Now, what is Spaces? And Spaces is on a Mac. You can have this feature where you open up different areas of the screen to be dedicated to certain configurations. So if there are certain apps that you open all the time, well, you can configure Spaces on a Mac so that, hey, this space 1, is always going to have the GarageBand and other apps, and space 2 some others, and then you can do quick switching between spaces. Now, I suppose Spaces on the iPad will be such that you can go to a state where you see the apps that you're working on in different, let's say 4 parts of the screen. So you can do quick switching between them. Because right now you do quick switching through this sort of dock at the bottom of the screen. So Spaces, I think, or something like Spaces for the iPad would be very, very clever. And, I hope Apple implements that in coming iOS. Okay, so the next story is the Wall Street Journal's All Things Digital reports that the Verizon iPhone was the February's most popular phone model sold. And, that kind of makes sense. I mean, there were some people who thought, wow, there weren't like big lines for the iPhone outside Verizon stores or Apple stores when the iPhone was launched. But the bottom line is I think they sold a lot anyways because, there were pre-orders that were allowed. And according to All Things Digital, the report comes from ComScore, which keeps track of these things. And what they say is that the market research outfit of ComScore said that the Verizon iPhone was the single most purchased cell phone model for the month of February. Now, what's amazing about that is that includes not only smartphones, but also regular cell phones. And what All Things Digital said is about while Apple's share of the total U.S. mobile phone market, smartphones, feature phones, etc., increased to 7.5%. The smartphone market growth leader continues to be Android, which now accounts for a third of smartphones in the United States compared to roughly a quarter of the smartphone market each for Apple and the BlackBerry. So, for Android is still sort of now surpassing total sales beyond the iPhone. But look, I think what's going on is there's just a lot more choice with Android, and I think there are cheaper Android phones out there. And so I think that's what's going on when you just have so many different providers. And Android, I'm pretty sure Android's on all four networks. Apple's only on AT&T and Verizon. But Apple's going to catch up with the Verizon iPhone by the fact that it was the best-selling cell phone of all kind in February. So it's going to be a brawl. It's going to be a brawl between Apple and Android, and we'll have to see what happens. Okay, so if you're into gadgets and like to predict what kind of gadget Apple will next come out with, well, Apple Insider has a nice story on Thursday, March 31st, which totally makes sense because it's so practical. So the story is that Apple may build its own external battery pack for recharging on the go. And it sounds like from the article what Apple intends to do is to build a battery pack that charges your iPhone or your MacBook Pro that's built into the electric cord or the plug for each device. And it totally makes sense because if you look at the chargers for the iPhone or for the Mac or for the iPad, they usually have this module that it's where you plug it into the wall, like a little white module. So what if Apple built like a rechargeable battery in there that could switch and would be off when you're plugged into the wall, but charging nevertheless, and then when you're not plugged in, it would charge your iPad or iPhone or MacBook Pro. I think it totally makes sense. It's such a clever idea. And this is an Apple Insider, and it's, I hope Apple comes out with something. And Apple will, because think of all the clever things they've done. They made the MagSafe charging plug. That's the sort of magnetic plug that connects to the MacBook Pro. So if you just happen to have your MacBook Pro plugged into the wall, and you accidentally move it quickly, the cord won't jerk it off the table. It'll just come undone because it's a magnetic connection. Similarly, the smart covers, which are magnetic clip-ons to the iPad 2, they're very clever. So don't put it beyond Apple to come up with a way to solve the charging pack issue. Finally, today, April 1st, 2011, it's Apple's birthday today because Apple officially, I guess, came to life as a corporation on April 1st, 35 years ago. And, one of the interesting things is GigaOM at the Apple blog has an article entitled Apple Turns 35, Where Does It Go From Here? And here's the sort of overview of the article. It points out that today's the 35th birthday. GigaOM points out that Apple made the PC and Apple is killing the PC. And, Steve Wozniak and Jobs really founded the modern personal computer. It then goes on to point out that Steve Jobs recently coined a term that we're entering into a post-PC era. And GigaOM points out that the term has spawned countless debates about whether or not we can claim to be actually living in a post-PC era yet, or whether Jobs can use that term to describe the use of devices that are still in many ways very dependent on PCs for syncing and media management. But GigaOM is correct in saying that whatever your opinion on whether or not we are or not truly entering the post-PC era, it's clearly the direction in which we're headed. Look, I'll point out that Lion is bringing the Mac closer. Lion's going to be the operating system that Apple reveals and distributes for the Mac in the summer. It's going to be closer and closer and feel and look to the iOS operating system. Mac Lion's going to be much more dependent on touch and using touch swipes to navigate the Mac operating system. GigaOM also points out that the cloud is Apple's biggest challenge, and I think GigaOM is right here too. GigaOM says as the post-PC market evolves, Apple faces possibly its greatest challenge yet, deploying strong cloud-based services offerings. Amazon, it points out, just this week introduced the Cloud Player and Cloud Drive, beating Apple to the punch with cloud-based music locker type offering. And Google is also ahead of Apple in terms of the cloud, with things like Gmail, Google Docs, Google Reader. And Apple has not yet revealed its plans or intentions in terms of offering music subscription services and streaming media. So that's Apple's challenge going ahead. Finally, it ends with the Revolution Co., the company. And then GigaOM says Apple throws the word revolutionary around quite a bit, almost as much as PR folks, in fact. But it would be a mistake to dismiss this as a mere marketing hyperbole. The company has consistently introduced products that change the face of the consumer electronics industry, and few, if any, could have predicted their arrival beforehand. That means that, to some degree, trying to pin down Apple's future plans will always be a slippery task. And it then goes on to say it's almost impossible to discount the role of Steve Jobs, who, no matter what your personal opinion regarding his medical prognosis, cannot lead the company forever. So GigaOM wonders, will Apple lose the ability to be a motivating force for market upheaval when he's gone? And the writer at GigaOM says, I say no, because Apple has a corporate culture based from the top down on fostering innovation and creativity, and that maintaining that at such a high rate of success for 35 years is not something any one person can manage through the force of will alone. And I think he's right. I think Apple will survive after Steve Jobs. I think Steve Jobs' greatest success, in addition to all the great products that he's delivered to us and the computer revolution, is that he put together and forged like a fantastic company that can just crank things out and be innovative. So I think his legacy is going to be that he really, really infused his proteges and the people who work with him into his way of thinking and his way of execution and his way of excellence. And I do think Apple's going to continue to innovate. I think there's so much more room to innovate. I think these tablet devices are going to become really powerful. I think voice recognition is going to be the next big era, as well as cloud services. So it's there's a lot that's going to happen in the coming 35 years for Apple. And I'm looking forward to it here at Mac's Future. So thanks for listening to this episode and of the Apple Podcast. And check out the iPad Podcast in the video version, all distributed through Apple Things on the iTunes podcast store. Okay, take care till next week.